This persuasive presentation is submitted alongside and in conjunction with the research proposal for extending impact and influencing others. To help with clarity and to ensure that this presentation is as easy to access as possible, it has been broken down into 4 specific areas. And so, on to the first section of 4. The first section is, what needs have you identified in this school? As you know, the title of this assignment is all about how you extend your influence and also impact others. So it's really important to me that I took the time that was necessary to ensure that I really understood the needs within my context. One of the first things that really became apparent was that there were many complex and interwoven needs. That is to say that often there are multi-dimensional and multifaceted needs happening underneath the surface, and these are constantly impacting on the learners within the classroom. Therefore, I would theorise that any solution would need to be at both an individual and an institutional level. The second thing was that the school had undergone a significant transformation programme, and because of this, much of the school had been digitised using Apple iPad devices. The third thing was that digitising the curriculum was therefore a real strategic priority for the school, and this was referenced in the school development plan. Fourthly, although when I began working at the school, I had some reticent feelings about using technology within the classroom, since being there, I've really become more engendered towards using EdTech, specifically in the classroom, and utilising it as a tool to increase motivation, engagement, and positive feelings towards learning. Lastly, as part of that reflective process to look at the needs in my school, I found that every child in my class had a really excellent level of digital literacy. That meant that if I was to look at any kind of intervention that I was designing as part of my research proposal, I knew that I could really build on their existing digital fluency and mastery to really extend and speed up the rate of digitisation of the curriculum at our school. After consulting with the head teacher and also collaborating with fellow practitioners, it became apparent that 2 concepts that really needed greater exploration were positive education and game-based learning. Of particular interest to me was how motivation, engagement, and well-being may be underpinning both of these emerging concepts and may be particularly relevant in our school, especially if we combined them in our approach. We are now moving on to the second area of this presentation, which is called How has the literature guided or challenged your thinking? As I began to explore more of the literature concerning positive education, it became quite apparent that, as an emerging area of study, there wasn't that much research that took theory into practice. That's why, for me, it proved to be quite an interesting area for further study. If you look at the upward spiral, you can see that positive education is all about promoting positive emotions, such as passion, enthusiasm, optimism, and hopefulness. These are all really important emotions to have if you are to build up the resilience and self-efficacy you need to pursue learning, especially when it gets difficult. However, this spiral does not act alone. It actually operates with a second interleaving spiral. Positive education requires us to consider how both of these spirals act together. So whilst we are promoting these positive emotions, it is also key that we understand how to manage the negative emotions, such as boredom, doubt, blame, anger. It is my assertion that many of the practices that we have already implemented here at School X actually follow the positive education model, because we are actively managing those negative emotions which impact our children whilst trying to promote upward spiral positive emotions. In summary, some of the key learning that came out of the literature around positive education was that as an approach it really helps children to develop adaptive qualities so that they can use trial and error in their learning. It also helps children to identify much earlier on the stressors that may limit them in their progression. Because children can endure and show the resilience needed to really play with the problem, they actually begin to start developing higher order thinking skills and problem solving. Finally, as previously mentioned, as it is a relatively new field of research, there are lots of conflicting ideas, and that certainly challenged my thinking as to how the research should be carried out. As you know, the digitisation of the curriculum is a key strategic priority for our school. Therefore, I wanted to make sure that I had a robust and critical literature review on gamification, as this is becoming an increasing part of our digital curriculum. Some key learning that came out of this literature was that actually as a pedagogical approach, it is becoming increasingly valid, and the wealth of research is increasing in that area. Secondly, reward systems are becoming increasingly more complex and actually much more relevant to the individual player themselves. Therefore, status, access, power and stuff are all part of a crucial gaming dynamic that sustain motivation and keep a child engaged in their learning. Thirdly, the paradigm of educational systems is actually significantly correlated and very complementary to many game-based elements, such as seeking rewards, being goal-orientated, using leaderboards, and also utilising datafication systems. Finally, it is apparent from the literature that there are certain sequences of learning, lessons and subjects that do particularly well when they're gamified. In specifically considering mathematics, it is those parts of the curriculum where there is a heavy amount of instructional learning or a child is required to do something which is a procedural task. In contrast, gamification is less effective currently when a question is requiring a free-form answer. However, there is an indication from the literature that machine learning and artificial intelligence is becoming more capable of assessing these. We are now moving on to the third section, which is what research are you proposing? It is my proposition that the research needs to look at how a combination of positive education and game-based learning can be complementary. For example, there are many elements within a positive education approach that look to enhance the positive emotions whilst managing and identifying those negative emotions. The development of such character traits would be beneficial for children pursuing game-based learning. More specifically, I am proposing that I will need to adopt a mixed method approach where I use quantitative and qualitative data in order to specifically observe the correct changes in behaviour that are occurring within my setting. Secondly, I propose that I will need to use a cyclical 4-stage model to ensure that I continue to reflect on what I am observing before I implement new actions within my dynamic setting. Thirdly, I propose that by promoting greater engagement, motivation and a love of mathematics, we will not only be ensuring that children develop greater well-being within the school context, they will also continue to develop these characteristics outside of the classroom. Finally, I wish to establish causal links between positive education and gamification, as I believe they are incredibly complementary concepts, but also the field is currently lacking research in this particular area. One of the models that I think will be particularly effective for measuring and observing the progress that children are making is the PERMA model, as this looks at 5 distinct areas: positive emotion, engagement, positive relationships, meaning and accomplishment. Each of these 5 facets is often discussed in relation to positive education and to gamification. Therefore, it seems like a good unifying method to adopt. In focus groups, I will ensure that I relate back to these 5 initial precepts. Also, when reflecting on my field notes, I will refer back to these 5 precepts to help guide my own reflections. Now into the final section, how do you theorise that this research will extend your impact and influence others? In the formation of this research proposal, I have consulted and collaborated with fellow practitioners both through the school Facebook page and my own LinkedIn page. I have been able to discuss theories to work out how I would apply those theories into my practice. By seeking challenge in this way, I have been able to construct a sample sequence of learning that not only refines some of the elements that we have created inside our digitised mathematics curriculum, it also includes the gamification elements that I propose. The 3 main takeaway theories that I propose will be taken from this research proposal are: 1. I will add value to 2 emerging fields of study and research, namely positive education and gamification. 2. I will promote the importance of participant action research across my context. Not only will I be developing my own pedagogical approaches, I will endeavour to extend my understanding and experience to other practitioners across my setting. Thirdly, I will clearly establish that using this combined approach promotes progress in this context. Although there are inevitably unique elements within our context, namely the Apple iPad device, I do contest that by establishing engagement, motivation, and well-being at an individual and institutional level, you can ensure that children will make greater progress within mathematics. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you are persuaded, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.